Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining Dorsey Ross on this episode of The Dorsey Ross Show. In this episode, Dorsey interviews another special guest that will give you hope and inspire you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining me on another episode of the Dorsey Ross Show. Today we have a special guest with us. Her name is Crystal Daye. She is a minister, international certified Christian life coach, inspirational speaker, award-winning best-selling author, brand strategist, publishing expert, mother, podcaster, and all-around Jesus girl. Crystal, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, I'm excited to be a part of the show. We have been, dialoguing for a few weeks, so I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so thank you for coming on. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you mentioned, I am Crystal Daye. I am from the beautiful island of Jamaica. Yes, so the weather is pretty nice now. We're heading into Christmas. We're kind of happy because with the COVID pandemic, we have been on lockdown a lot, so things are kind of opening up a little bit. And if you know anything about Caribbean people, we love to party and we love to go out. So we're happy that it is open a little bit. Outside of that, as you mentioned, I am an author of 9 books currently, working on releasing my 10th book very, very soon. And I'm a prolific writer. I write a lot. I'm a speaker. I sought after speakers. So I do quite a lot of speaking engagements. And I'm a mother. My favorite title, just to be able to, grow a child as best as I can. Outside of that, I'm just somewhat, I love social media. I love ministering. I love people. Like, I want to hug and, so that's a little bit about me.
Okay. Well, tell us about how you came to faith in Christ.
How did I come to Christ? So, it's a little long story, but to just make it very short, of course, Jamaica is, if anybody knows, Jamaica is known in the Guinness Book World of Record as the country with the most churches per square miles. So, the country kind of grew up in a very God conscious. So we have devotions in school. Not everybody's a Christian, of course, but we are a little bit open to what Christianity is, and we know a lot about that. But for me, I didn't really grow up in a Christian family. All of my aunt, I can remember really being a Christian. My parents tend to be free flow. We believe in prayer, but not, like that. I attended Catholic schools, I visited Catholic church. But it was when I was about 19 years old, a very close friend of mine, we used to date before, and he died. And death has a thing of making you be a little bit more God conscious, especially because he died at such a young age. I started to think, boy, is there more to life than this? And I started to visit churches, various churches. Some of them I didn't feel like I fit into, because I like the idea of wearing hats and, just the religious thing behind it. I wasn't sure I fit in, but when I did find a church that made me feel a little bit more open to, dress up and look nice, and, I didn't have to sing on the choir because I can't sing, So, that kind of made it a little bit more easier for me to transition. And of course, there's a long story of, just the life that I lived before, living, being very promiscuous, having multiple relationships, sex before marriage, and, being sexually molested at a young age, doing an abortion in my teenage years. So there are things that made me knew that I needed to serve God. And, the time came that I just kind of decided that to go full out,
How did you start the ministry that you are doing now?
How did I start? So after I decided to give my life to the Lord, one of the things, for many of us, we grew up in a society that tells us, go to school, get a degree. Then when I get a degree, you'll get a good job. And then you get a husband, and then you have 2.5 kids, with a dog. Right? And I just came to a place where I recognized that I had accomplished a lot of what I wanted. As a child, I bought a house. I grew up poor. So, I was at a place where I was growing But I just realized that something was missing, and I went on this quest for purpose. Like, is there more to life than bills? Is there more to life than partying? Because I used to party a lot before Christ. Is there more to life? And when I started to seek the Lord specific about my purpose, things that I was passionate, He kept saying, what I have you to do is things that I've already placed in you. So I started to write blogs. I started to minister, by writing on social media, and that opened doors for me to go and speak to schools. I mean, I've spoken at the embassy here, the U.S. Embassy. I've spoken at, some of the top organizations in the country, and as a result, I started to get interviewed on podcasts, internationally featured, and I think my purpose came from my passion for people, and then it was on through my writing, through my speaking, and through mentoring and coaching.
Obviously, it was God opening up those doors, but how did that come about? Obviously, God was in all that, but how did that come about? Did somebody approach you, or did you just, contact the U.S. Embassy in Connecticut, and they're like, oh, yeah, you can come in and speak?
Yeah. So, this is, of course, as you mentioned, yes, there was God that was opening the door, but then also, I recognize that there's something that was missing in the social media space regarding Christianity, and that's transparency. Christians tend to be very, just very closed off, like, almost like they were born saved. And I was now sharing that, hey, I had a past and I needed Jesus. And I think a lot of people were attracted to my transparency of my journey. And, they weren't used to seeing this. And as a result, it opened doors. So if I saw that persons were reaching out to me and people were blessed, and, as a result, more doors opened, the more that I was transparent about my journey, not saying that, just saying that, hey, we're humans, we are in this together. And that kind of started to open some more doors for me.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that Christians are so, as you say, closed off to being transparent and being open about, what they're going through and about what they're facing in their life?
I do think that there's a cultural aspect in the church. It's almost like for many churches, there's this thing that, hey, if I share my imperfections, I will be judged. And the truth is, many of us do not like the idea of being judged. We like to people please. People pleasing, we want to be loved, we want to be accepted, right? And, Paul in the scripture says that, you can't please man and please God at the same time. And I had to get to a place where, one, Solomon says in the word that, hey, there's nothing new under the sun. And once I recognize that, hey, no matter what I have gone through, no matter what I have done, there's somebody that have done it, that have gone through it. And, Rick Warren in his book, Purpose Driven Life, said, it's not about you. So once I started to realize, hey, my story is not just for me, my story is for others, to bless others. And I do think that many believers, many persons that call themselves Christian, they think, they say that they are serving God, but they still operate on a selfish place. They still operate on, oh, this is about me and my feelings. And once I started to realize that, hey, my story can bless others, I'm called to impact others, then I didn't feel so bad to share anything. Because once I shared, about me molested, there's so many women that started to come and say, me too, me too, me too, and no matter what you have been through, probably you would have lost a child. Somebody saying, hey, oh my God, I'm so happy that you share that. Somebody that's struggling with their marriage, or a man might be struggling with his marriage, and he's like, hey, I don't know how to communicate with my wife. Help me. And then, he finds that, hey, there's a community of men that are saying the same thing. So I think, the less Christians become selfish too and think about serving others, then you'll find that more of us will start opening up about our truths.
Right. And I travel around, and most people that, listen to me know that I travel around and I speak, and I share my own story. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, was to encourage others and say, hey, you know what, for those that are struggling, for those that are dealing with things in their life, you're not alone. Here are other people that will encourage you and inspire you in your life as well.
Yes, yes. And I mean, what you are doing, you are brave, you are amazing. To be so vulnerable, to be so real, and to not just that, like you could do this podcast and you just talk about yourself. You are allowing this girl in Jamaica to come and share on your podcast, that's you giving back to the world, so what you're doing is so amazing, and I thank you for allowing me to be here.
Absolutely. So share a testimony of a season that you struggled with your faith and how you overcame that.
Wow, that's a good one, right? So I'm gonna be honest. There are many seasons that I've struggled with faith, and I know most people see me as a faith walker, and I am to an extent. But there are still things that are in my heart that I think about. There's a fear of success, or a fear of greatness, and a fear of failure that hinder me. But the biggest one was when I felt like the Lord was calling me to leave my 9 to 5 job and to start and go full time in my business and ministry. And for me, that was a very challenging season because when I pan out the math, um, I had a mortgage. I'm a single mom. I just bought a new car, and financially in my mind, I'm like, will I be able to build a business that is so successful to cover my bills? So it took me a while to really accept that call to launch out there, and I can't believe January is going to be 5 years. 5 years I've been doing this full time. And every time I get a question, people say, what is your biggest achievement since starting your business? I tell people the fact that I'm still doing it is an achievement, because entrepreneurship has been a really it has had this, amazing moments. I help people to write books. So there's nothing more amazing than seeing their book come to life and see them cry and see them finally put their story together. But there have been seasons where the finances weren't coming to par, and, I had to go back to God like, hey, no, like you need to come through. So I think that was one of the biggest faith struggles that I've had, to let go of my comfort zone so I can walk in my greatness.
I've written a book, and people have told me, hey, you need to write another one. How do you, I know a lot of others, they've written, multiple books. How do you come up with different ideas for each book that you've written? And tell us a little bit about those books that you've written and the topics that they cover.
Yeah, that's a good question. So my first book came out in 2016. Actually released it on my birthday, August 18, 2016, and it's called Living a Royal Reality. Discovering your identity, purpose, and worth in Christ. And as I said, I started blogging about 2014, 2015, thereabout. I started blogging, and it was just me being transparent about my journey before Christ and kind of sharing how I found purpose, how God was able to show me that I'm not just a ghetto girl, and ghetto, quote unquote, is like in the projects, so in the US, they call it the projects, where persons are a little bit poor, etc. So in Jamaica, we call it ghetto, and God started to show me that you are not just a poor girl, but you are like a Jesus girl, like you have a purpose. So I wrote my first book, Living a Royal Reality, when it released. I tell people I don't know about any other Jamaican before that became an Amazon bestseller. So I became an Amazon bestseller within 48 hours. Within 30 days, I sold over 1,000 books, and I did not have a big platform. So I know that, God was definitely in it. After that, I found that the rest of my books, I knew that I was called to minister to women and young girls. So while I do minister to men, I don't focus on men. I do focus a lot on helping women to live wholesome, godly lives. So most of my books, the next one was Empowered for Such a Time as This. Then I wrote 2 devotional, Draw Closer to God. So I'm very passionate about helping people to practically, because it's so easy to say, oh, I know God, but how to practically have a relationship with Him. I also wrote Becoming a Christian Life Coach. So I became a Christian life coach. I started to train others to become a Christian life coach, when I also release Sell More Books, Impact More Lives, and it's how to teach authors to sell their books. I also had a Live It or Read It teen version where 11 teens, they wrote their story, and I published that, and that has been great also. And then now my new book right now that I'm promoting is Their Insecurity, and it's a woman's guide to release self-doubt and activate her gifts. And again, I found that my books are transition. So as I transition, my books transition with me. I share lessons. So people would say, but how can I find another topic to talk about? The best topics to talk about is your personal experiences and what you have learned. It might not be your personal testimony, but what have you learned? So like my new book that's coming out next in 2022 is called Blessed Book Boundless. And it is about I'll share a little bit about the entrepreneurial aspect, how I got into entrepreneurship, how I've been able to get more speaking engagement and to build a brand online. So I think for those who are listening and saying, how can you write so many books? It really is being honest, just like how you can come on a podcast and share your testimony week after week and share things. Is similarly, you just write what you are passionate about, right? And you're always learning. We are always learning. We are always experiencing new things. And it's just for you to record those things.
I may have to pick up that book about, where you talk about, getting more speaking engagements. I may have to pick up that book. What is your definition of purpose, and what does that look like to you?
Ooh, that's a good, Darcy. You're coming with the great questions today. So for me, personally, overall, when I think about purpose, is the reason for existing, right? But I do believe, in my book, my second book, Empowered for Such a Time as This, I actually have a chapter dedicated to what I believe. So I believe that there is two types of purpose. There are Dharma purpose, where it is your overall reason for existing. So what is the purpose? And all of our purpose is to bring God glory, through our gifts, through our passion, through our message. But how can we do that? And it doesn't have to be in entrepreneurship. It doesn't have to be as a speaker or author. It could be, how can you bring him glory as a mother? How can you bring him glory as a father? How can you bring him glory as a podcaster? How can you bring him glory in your 9-to-5 job? But then I believe that there's what I consider active purpose, which is now your specific calling, right? So some persons will say, hey, God has called me to lead a church, or God has called me to, and I do believe with your active purpose that you can change this in seasons. You understand? So there was a season when I worked as a procurement officer in the government, and God used me in that space. And now he transitioned me in entrepreneurship. And I believe one day he will transition me to be, speaking on more bigger stage and sharing the gospel, so that's what I think. One, I think that purpose overall brings God glory, why you're here. But I also believe that there's a specific assignment that we are walking out in different seasons.
So what I'm hearing you say is that, some people may, think about themselves, or may feel like, for this time in their life, they don't have a purpose, or they don't feel like this is their purpose in their life. But what I'm hearing you say, maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but you're saying that what you're doing right now in your life, that's your purpose for that season in your life until God moves you on to do something else.
Yes, and that's exactly what I'm saying. And I try to explain this even to my friends, because because people see people on social media, speaking and talking, and they're in their minds, they're like, oh, that's what purpose look like. But that's not the truth. You understand? I do believe that you are positioned for purpose. So where you are at, you need to say, Lord, what is it that I should do right now? Because the truth is, if you can be faithful in what you're doing right now, it is always a preparation for where you're going. And a lot of times we focus on trying to get to somewhere, but we have not been found faithful right now, right? So if wherever you're at, I know you hate your job, but ask the Lord, okay, if I'm supposed to switch, what does the switch look like? All right. If I'm supposed to go. And another thing, when you think about purpose, it's always something that, okay, what am I passionate about? what legacy do I want to leave on this earth before I leave, and use that as a clue to know how you'll move forward.
How did you find your purpose in what you're doing now, or what you have done in your life?
So as I said, for me, when I got to a place where when I started to see God for purpose, I started to look at the things that I enjoy doing. So I enjoyed hosting events, I enjoy ministering to women, I enjoy writing. And it was just for me to know, because it didn't come overnight. Like I didn't know all the time, like, oh, I'm going to become an entrepreneur. I even didn't know when I started to walk in purpose in 2014, I didn't know that, today I was thinking, I was saying, wow, I didn't know that I would be doing all of these things. But guess what? I was faithful with writing a blog, right? Even though I knew that there were more, I wasn't thinking that I would have 9 books in such a short time, right? But I wrote a blog. And then after I wrote a blog, I took my first speaking engagement. And, after I got the speaking engagement, that you just found that, I started to host events and it just came about. So I think if somebody's like, for me, how did I find it? It's just for me to pay attention to the things that I enjoy. And also, purpose is about who you're serving. So who do you feel like you're called to help the most? I think that's also help with the purpose.
You talk a lot about insecurity in your topic. Tell us about that.
Wow. Listen, you cannot do anything. Like, we all go through insecurities. I think women probably go through it a little bit more than men. I find that men tend to, if they really have an idea and they're passionate about it, they tend to jump out a little bit more. Not that they don't have insecurity, but they're a little bit more bold to step out there. With women, we are very conscious. So we're thinking, oh, what would she say? What would, So insecurity for me looked like, even when God was saying that I should speak, I used to say, whoa, people will not understand my Jamaican accent, or who would read my books, or, do I dress well? As a Black woman, do I look more attractive? So there are different things that cause me to want to shrink. And that's what insecurity does. It tells you that you're not good enough. It tells you that, that you are an imposter, you don't know enough. And what the Lord eventually showed me was that a lot of times when we think about insecurity, we just think about becoming more confident. But confidence is not you can be confident and still be insecure, like I am, right? I'm fairly confident in my skills. But he showed me that identity is the antidote for insecurity. Meaning, if I know who I am, then when I feel called to do something, then I'm going to go there because I know God will never allow me to fail. And when and in my new book, Dear Insecurity, I share practical steps, so things like having a vision, right? What does the vision for your life look like? I share, how can you become God motivated, right? I share different topics around overcoming their insecurity so that you can show up boldly with your gifts.
What advice would you give to people who are listening, who are dealing with insecurity and about how to overcome, their insecurity in their life?
I mean, major thing when we think about their insecurity, one, I want you to recognize that a lot of the reason why you feel how you feel is because their insecurity. One, I'll be honest to find the root of that insecurity. So things like procrastination, things like fear of success, things like, you find that you're always doubting yourself, self-doubt, right? These are the things that I would say you start by the root, their insecurity. Start by the root. Then after you have gotten to the root, then I want you to know, look at what is it that you want to accomplish? What is it that you feel more called to do? Then I want you to define success for yourself, because one of the major reason why we struggle with insecurity is because we are comparing others, right? So I'm jealous of somebody that is I see a nice young lady, she's a pilot, and she just graduated from law school, and I kind of feel cute. And then I have to ask myself, do I even really want to become a lawyer? Do I really want to become, So define the success. What does success look like for you? Another way that I think it should help you to get to your insecurity is to discover your gifts. What is it that I am good at? Right? What is it that I'm great at? Right? Because when you discover that, also you are able to be more confident in it. The final one I say is to kind of accept your identity, as I mentioned. Accept who you are. Yes, because I'm from Jamaica, I come from an accent, but that is not a disadvantage. It just means that it brings a little spice to Dorsey show, right? So that's kind of some things that I do to help me to get over my insecurity. And in the book, I share many other ways. I share, like 14 ways and 14 things to help you to get through and to say bye to their insecurity.
Sounds good. As we get ready to end today, is there any encouragement that you would want to give to the people who are listening?
Definitely. So one, I would say one of the major things overall when it comes to life is to always work on growing your faith, right? You will always so all of us have a measure of faith, but if we are not conscious about growing our faith, we will find that we're always shrinking back. So the more you grow your faith is the more you give yourself permission to be the better version of yourself. Because the truth is, greatness is not found in your comfort zone. I'm sure when you were thinking to start your podcast, you were saying to yourself, do I have a big platform? Do I have the time to do this? Will anybody listening talk to me? Did you feel any way like that? And
Absolutely, I still do.
And you still do, right? And that's what greatness. So your greatness is never found in your comfort zone, because if you were just staying in your comfort zone, then you would not have this podcast, and then you would not be able to give me the opportunity to share.
Thank you again for joining Dorsey Ross on this episode of The Dorsey Ross Show. Please like, share, and tell others about the show. Also, please check out the other podcast episodes. And if you would like, donate to this podcast and buy Dorsey a coffee. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.